presentations that are shared. So, so that is how we, that is what we do, and we always do, and we will pop in the link again for you all, but you can find it clearly on our website under GFAN calls. Today, our agenda is fairly straightforward. We wanted to give you an opportunity to hear from some colleagues around the Lusaka agenda, formerly called the Future of Global Health Initiatives, just for an update on the first interim steering group meeting last month and the upcoming one, which is actually starting in 30 minutes, which is where you'll see me have to disappear off to. We also wanted to take an opportunity to introduce you to new members of GFAN's International Steering Committee and hear from colleagues at the Global Fund Secretariat and at the Stop TB Partnership about World TB Day communications and tools that you can be using in your work. So that's our agenda, and as always, we hope we've saved enough time in there for discussion. Because I do, and I'll come to this, but because I do actually have to leave on the half an hour, I'm going to flip the agenda just a little bit. So Conte, would you be able to put up the slide with our new ISC members, some of whom have joined us today, but we just wanted to let all of you know and join us in making a warm welcome to our new steering committee members after a sort of public and open call for applications last fall. We're pleased to confirm Yolanda Paul, Colin Smith, and Jake Atkinson from the organizations you see there on the screen who have joined our International Steering Committee. Don't start asking them questions just yet. They've only had their orientation call yesterday and will join their first meeting at the beginning of next month. But welcome, and I see Jake and I think Colin as well on the call. And I don't know that you have any words of wisdom yet as new steering committee members, but you're welcome to say hello. But both are on screen at the moment. So thank you both very much for joining and taking this on.
Thanks, Katie. I can see Colin, but I'll just jump in. Yeah, I just wanted to say hi, everyone. I've been on these calls for well, a long time now, and really just inspired by all of you in this entire amazing network. And I'm looking forward to seeing some more of you soon in Bangkok, and hope to have some more conversations with a lot of you. But, yeah, really thrilled to be on this endeavor with all of you. So thank you so much, and keep up the amazing work, and looking forward to working with you. And I'll drop my email in the chat as always if anyone does want to reach out or have any other conversations. But thank you. Colin.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Jumping in, say similar, and apologies with the agenda switch. I'm halfway to my office, so you get me on the street in Washington, D.C. But hi, everybody. Really thrilled to be joining this group, and have worked at Results for the last 10 years, and before that at Friends of the Global Fight. And I was recalling talking to Jake and Yolanda and Katie yesterday that partnering with one of the experts in the Here I Am campaign, the predecessor to the GFAN Speakers Bureau, was one of the very first things I did when I joined Friends. So really delighted to be in this role now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Colin, and safe walking. Don't get too distracted by the conversation. Thank you both so much. And just we will be putting out a bit of a statement on this, and just drawing attention at this time. I don't think either of them were able to join today's call, but these three new members joined the ISC, and we say goodbye after many, many years to Joanne Carter and Mike Podmore, respectively, of Results in the US and Stop AIDS in the UK, who have both provided, close to a decade, I think it is, each of them, of guidance and support to GFAN. And I know they won't go very far, so you'll still be hearing from them, but a warm thank you to them as well. So we'll go back to resuming our regular scheduled agenda here and take a step back in terms of the Lusaka agenda. Again, this is what is now the Future of Global Health Initiatives. As you may or may not know, a number of civil society reps have been asked to be members of this interim working group, which is meant to close its phase of work in April. So a very, very short and tight timeline, which it's not clear to me at this stage will actually be able to be met. But there are a number of civil society and community colleagues who do sit within that, including myself, and as well as Cecilia Sanu, our ISC co-chair, but also developing country NGO board member for the Global Fund, and R.D. Marta from Abcaso, and Osvaldo Rivera. And I'm sorry, I'm just forgetting where Osvaldo is based. And my understanding is that the conveners who continue to be Wellcome Trust in this interim period, who are providing Secretariat support, are still looking for other community and civil society colleagues to join in this interim phase. And one of the objectives in asking myself to join this conversation is because of the work that GFAN had done with colleagues and partners around the globe in the fall around sort of pushing back on some of the what we saw at the time as sort of red lines for civil society and communities, making sure that we were discussing about country ownership over work and not government ownership over work, for example. So you can see those past resources still up on our website, and they continue to guide us, but also coming out of the work that GFAN did with other partners to support civil society and communities during Act A. Part of what we will be doing and what I will be helping to lead is whatever this final structure or next phase looks like post-April, is we will convene an open and transparent call for civil society and community applications based on some kind of terms of reference of what the work will actually entail. And so we have been anchoring our comments within this process around the meaningful inclusion of civil society and communities, which has, sort of 5 principles within it, which includes that civil society and communities select their own leaders and their own representatives in these kinds of bodies, that they are meaningfully supported, and that they are involved from the decision-making sort of process all the way through implementation and monitoring of, whatever the work might be. So hopefully we will see some movement on that, possibly next month. Again, my guess is this is not going to conclude by April, given that we're at the beginning of March and only having our second meeting a little bit later today, actually in about 20 minutes. So what I did want to share is that this is sort of the highlights of what the agenda is for today. And I share that, but want you to know that absolutely none of these agenda items have any documentation behind them. There will be presentations, I am sure, but for example, this idea of finding pathfinder countries that would implement the 5 shifts of the FGHI Lusaka agenda, there hasn't been a broad discussion yet about even the specifics and the ways to select pathfinder countries, other than to say that all members seem to be in agreement that we can't just pardon the maybe North American expression, but kind of cherry pick or pick those countries that are obviously going to provide good examples. We also have to provide and look at countries where some of these shifts might be significantly or at least harder to implement. And so while these conversations are taking place, there isn't a significant amount of information out there, or in my opinion, a lot of clarity within those who are on this interim steering group that we agree on sort of the ultimate objectives or end goals. That said, after February's meeting, the Secretariat at Wellcome Trust did send out a survey that will be discussed today on the call that asks some of those questions, like what individual members think are the objectives? Do we have, sort of the right two sort of objectives that people have been talking about? And so I think we're getting there, but part of my interventions anyways have been, this actually takes a significant amount of time. The process last year was quite rushed, didn't produce great background documentation, and we need to sort of take our time. Conte has shared what was in the chat just now, a link to a brief that's been recently published that attempts to sort of explain what the Lusaka agenda is. It's worthwhile to read. It's also worthwhile to note that this was produced by the Secretariat and there wasn't input from steering group members yet on that. The key things that the interim working group is looking to consolidate its actions on are how the group tries to influence and support the governance mechanisms of global health institutions like the Global Fund Board, the Gavi Board, et cetera, in terms of adopting these shifts. So a big shift last year was in getting the FGHI and Lusaka agenda to the point where it acknowledged that these kinds of changes would have to take place within the structures of the global health institutions themselves. And now there does seem to be a focus in terms of looking ahead at the schedule of the global health institutions, when their committee meetings are, when their board meetings are, and trying to make sensible interventions that encourage the board members or other governance representatives to look at and examine the shifts and how those institutions could make changes. So we're expecting, there's been a draft letter that would go out to the Global Fund ahead of its coming set of committee meetings and board meeting, or perhaps as a follow-up to the committee meetings. That decision will be made today, but there has been work on that letter that we've been able to input into. And I think what many of us have struggled with is, like, what is this process? And I think it's probably more helpful to think of it as a space for dialogue as opposed to a well-formed and thought-through process at this stage. We may get there, but that's sort of my sense in terms of where it's going. So that's all that I'm going to say on it, which is probably way too much. But wanted to give you a sense as a steering committee interim working group member. There have been different names for this at different times. In terms of where I feel this is. We also have colleagues from who are sort of adjacent to this, not sitting within the working group, who are going to chit chat a little bit here about some of that work and how it's being talked about in what we call in the Global Fund world implementing countries. And I think also we have a colleague from the Secretariat who's going to jump in with a few thoughts. So after we hear from colleagues, we'll go to questions, but I'll also try to check the chat here after I've finished if there are any questions or clarifications that I can add. So Rosemary, I think you were going to jump in at this stage. So could I pass it over to you, Rosemary Mburu from Wacky Health?
Yes, so thank you so much, Katy, for that. So mine is pretty much to add on to Katy's point around the FGHI process. And I think first to say that even as GFAN Africa and, communities and civil society, I think every day there is a new insight about what this process is about, the background, the aspirations of the conveners, and where it's going from here. So I think we are learning together. And so with FGHI being a time-bound process, which resulted into the Lusaka agenda. So right now we are pretty much talking about implementation of the Lusaka agenda. And we had an opportunity last week to listen to Dr. Kithinji Gitahi. As you know, this process was co-chaired by the government of Kenya and Norway. And Kenya, Dr. Kithinji and AMREF were pretty much leading the process. And even now in the implementation of the Lusaka agenda, there is a lot that Dr. Kithinji himself and AMREF are providing leadership for. And so one of the things we've really been trying to understand and to listen to is the perspective of implementing countries. Like, what kind of frame of mind are they coming into this process with? Because during the Lusaka meeting that endorsed the Lusaka agenda, I think being in that room helped me understand that different ministers of health were coming into the space with different understandings of what this process was. But a conversation with Dr. Kithinji last week helped us understand a few things, which might also help us as we approach, as we navigate, as we figure out what the advocacy pressure points might be. I think the first thing is to understand that the African leadership sees this process as a process that builds upon the aid effectiveness kind of policies and efforts, going back all the way to the Paris Declaration on AIDS Effectiveness in 2005, which was looking at ownership, alignment, harmonization, and results. And then moving from there, going to the international partnership, health partnership, the IHP process and platform in 2007, again, also looking at, like one country health strategy, one results framework, and so on, still aligned around ownership, harmonization, etc., which then moved into the Accra agenda, for action in 2008. Again, ownership, partnership, the same kind of thematic issues. And then also the UHC 2030 process in 2015. And all being aligned in terms of the aspirations, especially of implementing countries, low and middle income countries that are partnering with either donors or global health institutions to see a more harmonized process and partnership. And so the Lusaka agenda is seen as yet another attempt to help with alignment, ownership, mutual accountability, etc. And what we gathered is that there's a lot of support, from implementing countries for this agenda, and really a desire and an ambition to see that it actually succeeds and it doesn't end up like the Paris Declaration or the IHP Plus, like its predecessors, to really see that it becomes productive. And because of that, it is going, and the conversation at looking at how to place it, at a very high political place within the African Union, which is something still under conversation, under discussion, with the support of African heads of state as champions for this. So I think understanding that, for us was very important, but also understanding that one of the biggest desires, by, African leaders is to use this Lusaka agenda to achieve what they are calling respectful partnerships is something they are looking at. But also there are three key things that they have in mind when they think about the vision of the Lusaka agenda. One is that implementing countries take increasing responsibility for priority setting of equitable, essential, and cost-effective interventions. So increasing responsibility by implementing countries. And the second one is that donors shift accountability for delivery more to countries, demonstrating higher risk appetite. So this higher risk appetite is something that, the political leadership in the region and those that have been participating in this process are very keen about. And the last one is that the GHIs support countries in this effort, embedding sustainability and building greater operational flexibility. So flexibilities, higher risk appetite, increasing responsibility for implementing countries. So this is where the African leadership is coming from. I know as GFAN, we have identified a number of red flags, some missed opportunities, and we've spoken about how this process can help us achieve certain things. For example, we've talked about the differentiating between country leadership and government leadership, because we want to safeguard the place of communities and civil society within this country-led model. Then there's also, we've also raised the flag that it's important that this process continues to understand and to embrace the mandate of the global health institutions. Then the appreciation of domestic resource mobilization is something that we have raised in saying that, there is a desire to have DRM as a stronger component of financing in implementing countries. But I think also there is an opportunity there to say that domestic resources alone, without the international funding, without the global health institutions, cannot, end the epidemics and so on and so forth. And there's also a a missed point around human rights, human rights, eliminating the social barriers, societal enablers, and all that is language that is missing. So I think my reflection has always been to say that, one, it's important to listen to the African leadership, like where are they coming from? What is informing their reflections, their thoughts, and their input? And then also to understand that, but also to continue to push for the principles that we would like to see in terms of implementation of the 5 key shifts. So Katy, that's my quick input and reflection.
Thanks, Rosemary. I think it's helpful because I remember hearing from you after that December meeting, and the perspectives of implementing countries or countries that are going to, what the motivation is, right, for involving in this, because sometimes it has looked like a really inverted kind of power structure in terms of some of the people who have been involved in leading and pushing the discussion. But it's important, and I think we've had some discussions within some of our GFAN colleagues, and we will be working on something that does try to pull out what is needed and why this agenda has resonance within implementing countries for these global health institutions, and why some of those some of the reasons that that's important is across many of those countries. The transaction costs, for example, in working with GHIs can be quite hard and quite high. And there's, that's something that is worth looking at. But we also have to look at what some of the trade-offs are for making transaction costs lower. There are necessarily some trade-offs, and we have to understand what they are for each institution. So thank you, Rosemary. Linda, I think I've seen her online.
Hello, I am. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Linda. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Katy, and thanks, Rose, because you have touched most of the areas that we are also grappling with. I think you've highlighted the 5 key shifts that are highlighted on the GHI Lusaka agenda. And those key shifts are important in terms of what the Global Fund is already doing. So if you look at the issue of investing in primary health care as part of strengthening health system, that is the area that Global Fund is already looking at and working with. Also, the area of catalyzing domestic resources and also ensuring that those domestic resources are allocated to health. That again, the area that Global Fund is working with, and around sustainability as well. Health equity, I think, as demonstrated by what happened during COVID-19. So it's something that Global Fund is already working on. So the key shifts are the areas that Global Fund is already looking at and working on. However, there are certain emphases that we need to look at. So, for instance, in terms of what we are doing already around domestic resource mobilization, there's an area of co-financing, and therefore strengthening the monitoring of co-financing is now elevated. And then in terms of, again, collaboration with Gavi as part of ensuring coherence around engaging with countries. So collaboration with Gavi is quite important. There are 4 work streams that are including resilient and sustainable systems for health, as well as intervention in malaria. So on the 8th of April, Gavi and Global Fund will have a meeting to look at unpacking what collaboration means, and how the country-facing work would look like. So already there's a plan to have that discussion. There are key areas, partners, that are very important for the Global Fund at this point in time, particularly taking it to the board, because there are areas where the Secretariat is asking the board, what are the aspects of the Lusaka agenda that are consistent with the Global Fund current strategy? So what are those areas, and therefore, what is it that we can work on? Also identify which aspects of the Lusaka agenda that is misaligned with the Global Fund strategy, a continuous discussion around that. I think in the informal board call that was updating the board about the Lusaka agenda, one of the key things that was raised was the engagement of civil society in all the discussions. And there was a gap, there was an obvious gap in terms of the process engaging civil society. And as you all know, that Global Fund emphasizes the fact that communities have to be at the center of the discussion, and they should not be coming in late to the discussion. They have to be part of that. They have to be in the journey. And so again, they are concerns around that in terms of the civil society engagement. And we will continue to give you an update on where things are, particularly as we move with the 5 key shifts, because some of them have 24 months deadline. And therefore we need to see how we work with that. So that's the update that I have, Katy, from my side. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. That's really helpful. I know some of some of the overarching comments that we've made as GFAN at different times has been that to some extent, a lot of the communications coming out of the FGHI and now the Lusaka agenda have sort of seemed to ignore the history of partnership and collaboration that already exists amongst GHIs in general. It's maybe poorly explained. I can agree with that kind of assessment, but it's there. And so, for example, as recently as yesterday, I was pointing out that language that talked about, malaria being the first opportunity for Gavi and Global Fund to collaborate on a disease threat is just not reflective of reality. Not only did they work closely together through ACTE on COVID, but the work that's been done on HPV, to combat cervical cancer, a leading cause of death amongst women with HIV, it's ignoring this history, right? Instead of building on it, which is a useful thing, I think, and a better way to look at some of this. So, yeah. So anyways, this is helpful to hear from you, Linda, and to know how strongly the Global Fund is engaging in this, because overall, while I think the process has been faulty, because it hasn't actually been a process, it's been more of a dialogue. But because it has been faulty in terms of inclusion and transparency and understanding of the objectives, I think there's merit to the discussions. There's merit to talking about much that is involved with these 5 shifts. So I see in the chat that is directed at Rosemary from Pernilla around, I'm so sorry, whether these shifts are aligned with the new public health order from the I think it's the AU CDC or, so Rosemary, if you're able to respond to that. Did anybody else have any questions or comments around this at this stage? Rosemary, did you want to go ahead? Saw you on.
Yes. So that's a great observation there. And actually, the current Lusaka agenda conceptual framework has the Africa CDC's new public health order mentioned there as like a cross-cutting element, which shows that it is fully aligned. The Lusaka agenda is fully aligned with the Africa CDC's new public health order. So that's a great observation and spot on.
Okay, thank you. Peter, I see your hand raised. Peter Owiti. Go ahead.
Of me?
Yes, Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. I have a question. The Lusaka agenda, to the best of my understanding, was to provide a foundation for a coordination action and shift this path towards a long-term vision of domestically financed health system. And therefore, we expected every country to start transition plan to take over the health in their respective country. And there are examples of those countries that have already developed transition plan, because here in Kenya, it's not yet out. The transition plan is on the pipeline, but it's not yet clear as we shift towards the 2030 touchline.
So I'll say something really quick and then open it to Linda or Rosemary. But you know, I'm not sure that this process was intended to, you know, suggest coordinated action. There hasn't been much that has been coordinated about it. And that's just me being maybe a bit salty this morning. But for sure, I would say that a key part of the narrative that many of those who are involved in this interim working group speak about is this idea of sustainability, which to my mind is code for donors retreating. And it's couched in sustainability and transition. And yes, the ultimate objective is, I think, always, you know, to get to a place where health systems are financed domestically. And so I think that many countries do see this agenda as a way to sort of advance that. And the pathfinder countries that they're talking about, sort of looking at how these shifts are being adopted or could be adopted at the country level, again, is meant to be that kind of proof point of how these shifts can or are occurring. And the caveat that some of us have put on this, and I would say this is not just civil society, this does seem to be across the board among a number of members, is that those pathfinder countries cannot simply be selected from countries who are already well down the road towards, you know, sustainability and transitioning more and more towards domestic resources, because it isn't possible in every scenario, right? And even where it is more possible, like I think, you know, in Kenya, it's more possible, but it's still not a short-term reality, right? I think is the way to look at that. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, and you know, I welcome somebody to correct me on that. But so looking at pathfinder countries and finding them and making sure that they're a good cross-section of where domestic financing and domestic sort of, leadership in terms of health is at, is part of this process. And today's meeting, which started 4 minutes ago and I'm going to have to jump over to, is going to be discussing some of the parameters around those pathfinder countries that a small group of members of that working group have apparently pulled together. But Rosemary, Linda, was there anything you wanted to add to those comments?
A quick addition from me. This is Linda. So in terms of the countries looking or developing their plans for transition, in some countries they have started not as a result of the FGHI Lusaka agenda. They had started already because they were working on it anyway. And then also they are supported by Global Fund health financing team in some countries. And also through the leadership of the Africa Leadership Meeting, which was started at the AU summit and led by President Kagame. So there's another mechanism where countries are supposed to report on how they are doing on their domestic resource allocation to health, but also increasing their fiscal space so that they have an incremental growing resource mobilization for health. So there are those processes, but most of them were not triggered by this process. However, there are processes where, again, the FGHI or the Lusaka agenda can build on.
Thanks, and go ahead, Rosemary.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the African Leadership Meeting. Linda has mentioned that the ALM, that it's possibly going to be the accountability framework. So what we heard is, you know, there is an accountability framework for the Lusaka agenda that is under discussion right now. And possibly it's going to be anchored within the African leadership, you know, the ALM framework. And so perhaps there's a linkage there in terms of either transition, but also implementing countries stepping up domestic investments in health. Thank you.
Thank you both. And I actually do have to run as a member of that interim working group and join that meeting. So I apologize, but it's really great to have this discussion right before that. I'm going to pass it back over to Quentin, who's going to take you through colleagues' World TB Days presentations. But I would just like to say I've already done my World TB Day part, or started, as you can see with my background, which is available through Stop TB, and I'm sure Geraldine will come to that in a little bit. So thank you all for this discussion. Quentin, over to you, and apologies to all that I do have to run. Take care.
Thanks a lot, Katie. Yes, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to Linda and Rosemary for a really interesting discussion. I want to invite Ernest from the Global Fund Secretariat for his presentation on World TB Day and their plans.
Hi.
Hi, Ernest. We can't hear you, you're muted.
Sorry for that. Thank you. I have some 2 slides I want to share very quickly. Can you see that? Or not yet? Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll be quite quick with this one. When I thought about what I should present to this group is 2 things. The first one being the kind of messaging we are going with as the Global Fund, and of course, what we have prepared for the World TB Day. 2 elements. The first one being the messaging, and the second one being the kind of products that we are preparing and which the partnership can help us amplify, which we can work on together. So on to messaging. Many of you will remember this slide. We presented it for the results report last year, but I wanted to highlight because the story we are telling for World TB Day, by and large, and it's a story we are very excited about, is a huge momentum we are seeing in the fight against TB. And we all know that for a long time, TB had stagnated. The fight against TB progress was not as huge. But we are seeing phenomenal momentum in the fight against this disease. If anyone is dealing with fatigue, people who are looking for a good story, TB is a good story. And that's the story we are going to be telling this time. Huge recoveries or sharp recoveries after COVID. The number of newly diagnosed, many of these data points, you find them in the Global TB report. TB treatment coverage, really ramping up past the 2019 levels. Treatment success rates, or at least at the 2019 levels, treatment success rates going the same way. And of course, to mention that we have all these innovations that are in the pipeline. One of the big things that has been a game changer in the fight against TB in the last few years is, of course, approaches to find missing people with TB. But also we know there are many tools in the pipeline, but also some that we are already using, from short treatment regimens to preventive therapy, and of course, a vaccine that is in the horizon. So the World TB theme, as guided by Stop TB, is yes, we can end TB, and yes, truly we can end TB. But there's still some work to be done. As we all know, we are off the trajectory required to end this disease by 2030. But if we can ride the momentum, if we can take advantage of the momentum we are seeing, we are very positive that we really can accelerate progress in a big way. On to, very quickly, the type of pieces or products that we prepared for World TB Day. There are some thought leadership pieces, one by Peter, the other one by Eliud and Mohammed, who are our TB experts. And there's also one by Mira Aliambeva, who is a Global Fund Youth Council member. We have an exposure feature story that looks at Pakistan and use of AI there to guide the finding of missing people with TB. We are going to be refreshing our World TB Day webpage. Sorry. We will have our usual key messages and talking points. This is sort of a list of messages that we put together to guide our teams, but also the partnership when needed. And we put all that together in a social media toolkit that will be circulated in a few days. So that's it in a nutshell. Thank you.
So much, Ernest, and I will now turn it over to Geraldine for the presentation from the Stop TB Partnership. Over to you.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. So for our World TB Day campaign, as Ernest mentioned earlier, we decided with partners and having many discussions with many people to keep last year's theme, which is Yes, We Can End TB. The reason is that we want to keep the focus on the work that has been done, the amazing work and the momentum that has been happening in 2023. And we want to emphasize the power of collaboration amongst those who have been affected by TB, local communities, civil societies, innovators. So we thought this was a good theme to keep. And then finally, we also want to send a message of encouragement, encouraging each other in our shared journey towards trying to end TB by 2030. So we wanted it to be positive, and we kept the theme, Yes, We Can End TB. Perhaps I can share my screen. I have a few slides. Just a second. Here you go. So we kept the same branding. Can everybody see my screen?
Not yet.
But it's still in the presentation mode. Yeah, there we go.
We kept more or less the same messaging. We want to focus on some key thematic areas, which is escalating funding, finding new funding and plugging the gap in terms of what is needed to end TB. So we have prepared pre-written messages and visuals to be shared on social media or to be displayed wherever possible. These messaging are around escalating funding for implementation, getting more funding for research, development of new tool, including AI and a new vaccine against TB, enhance access to rapid molecular diagnosis and getting more efficient, better treatments, prioritizing TB prevention, addressing TB in children, fighting stigma, and also doing some work on community rights and gender. We also have the Light Up campaign that will keep happening, and we hope that we can get as many building and landmarks illuminated in red to attract attention to tuberculosis. We have the social media toolkit and the messaging that we are hoping that all organizations and individuals will share. We have a map, and we encourage everybody to fill a form and pin your event onto the map so that we can know what's happening where, and we can draw attention to those events that are happening before, during, and after World TB Day. And then we have our graphics that can be used. But this year, we have a little twist. We would really like to hear from you as people, you as professionals, you as leaders, on what you're planning on doing to end TB. So we would like people to share a pledge or a concrete action, a concrete step that you're gonna take this year towards ending TB, and sharing it on social media using our hashtags so that it can be displayed on our website, because all the messages and posts that are being tagged with those hashtags will be displayed on our website. So in a nutshell, we are hoping that you will take ownership of our toolkit and the messaging, and that you will also make it your own, and that will get as much exposure as possible for our campaign. That's it for me. Here is the QR code if you want to download the toolkit. Over to you.
So much for that presentation. I already see that Peter's hand is up. So Peter, over to you. But in case anyone else also has any questions or comments, please feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat. Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much for this other opportunity. I'm Peter from Kenya, and I'm in the planning committee of the World TB Day in Kenya. So we have one session that we have identified one town where we're going to have the national day, which has been pushed to the World TB Day is on a Sunday, so we have pushed it ahead by one day. But I also have in my own area a pre-World Activity Day, which is a roundtable, a town hall meeting. So I was asking, should we post individual or should we post only the national events? Because we have many events from different things, but the same country. So is it okay if every event that enhances the World TB Day, whether it's a post-World TB Day or it's a pre-World TB Day, should we all put that on the map? Thank you.
Yes, I think the idea is to share all events that are happening for World TB Day, individual and organizations. So please go ahead.
Thank you.
And just to add to that, we are very keen to amplify. It's a sharing economy. So we are very keen to work with others to amplify the day as we have always done. So please tag us. Let's amplify each other. Let's make the noise as we need to. Thank you.
So much, Ernest, for that. Any other questions or comments, or in case you have something planned that you would like to share with the other participants, or drum up support for an action that you are doing for World TB Day, this would be the moment to take the stage. Seal, over to you. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Is that for everyone? Can someone else? Yeah, no, we can't hear you. Yes, please go ahead and pop in your question or your comment in the chat. Sorry that the microphone doesn't seem to be working. Anyone else with any comments or any questions at this moment? Because I'm not seeing any other hands raised, what I'm going to do is just take a moment to just remind people, because we are in fact talking about World TB Day and we are talking about the action towards ending TB, that the Union Conference submissions are now open. So if you navigate over to the Union Conference website, which is now live, you can not only start applying for sessions, but also start applying for being track leads of the Community Connect space in the Union, which we know is the space that is designed and created specifically for affected community members to present the work that they have been doing and also to present the plans that they might have in terms of actioning and battling TB. So just an update that the website for the Union Conference is now live, and head on over to get some updates. I will also pop a link to the website in the chat now. Okay, I see a link. Geraldine has put in a link in the chat. Right, okay, so that is the, of course, the website that you can navigate over to see all the content and all the collateral that she has just mentioned. That's the link that you can use. Thank you for sharing that. No other comments or questions? You seem to be a very quiet group today.
Priyanka, just a quick one, if you could allow me. I just wanted to, it's not related to Stop TB per se, but you said to World TB Day per se, but to just say that we really appreciate this opportunity, and especially as we, this year, next year, as we build up towards the replenishment, but also beyond the replenishment. We are very keen to provide any briefings you may need. So please feel free to invite us whenever you may need something from us. We really want to, work with the network to amplify our messaging and to really accelerate progress that we are making. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you so
wow.
much, Ernest. Peter, I see you are unmuted. Was there a comment or a question?
No, sorry, this was a fault. Excuse me, please.
No worries. Okay, so the link to the Union Conference is in the chat, and the last call for any comments or questions. Going once, going twice.
Is the mic
All right.
now?
Yes, it is. Hi, Lucille, go ahead.
Okay, sorry for that. I changed the whole setup. Yeah, just to mention that, so I am with Global Health Advocates in France, and for the World TB Day, we are planning on publishing an article calling for the full implementation of the new political declaration, also calling France specifically to raise its investment. So as it was presented, the kind of the same messages than previous years, but renewed with updated targets. And so thank you very much for all the materials presented today. I will also relay it, forward it to our comms department for a big communication moment on this week, on this day. Thank you.
And we'll also keep an eye out, and we will amplify it using our social media. So with that, we will give back 4 minutes of the day to everyone. Thank you to all the presenters and all the people who took part in the call today. We really appreciate your time and have a great rest of the day, everyone. Take care.